Portrait of a Lady on Fire, out in cinemas now, the new French film that won Best Screenplay at this year's Cannes Festival, and was apparently a favorite for many critics for the main prize, which it eventually lost to Parasite. It is a love story that I was told would be the female take on Call Me By Your Name. And that immediately set my expectations pretty high because I think that Call Me By Your Name is an exceptional film, one of the very best of the decade, and perhaps that is why I am now thoroughly disappointed. So the story takes place in 18th century France, with Marianne, a young painter, coming to a secluded island off the coast of France. She was commissioned to make a portrait of Heloise, who is the daughter of the lady of the house, and she has returned home from a monastery in order to take place of her late sister that died recently by falling off a cliff, likely by suicide, although that's not really expanded upon. And Heloise is supposed to take her place in a marriage with a gentleman from Milan who she hasn't even met in person. And the painting is supposed to convey her beauty to him and to convince him that she is indeed a fine candidate. However, Heloise does not want to be a bride and certainly does not want to have a portrait made. She refuses to even pose for it. And that's why Marianne is supposed to pretend to be her guardian during the walks on the cliffs and fields and beaches of the island. And in the meanwhile, she has to observe Heloise in secret and create this painting basically from memory, from what she's able to observe. And she begins to do so, and as things progress, a relationship develops between the two young women, a relationship that gets progressively closer. Now, the first thing that needs to be said, that for a love story, this is an insanely cold film. I mean that both emotionally and in terms of the story, but also technically speaking, because of the location and the fact that the story takes place during what appears to be autumn, it is just a bit of a dreary setting overall. And then you couple that with the minimalism in regards to the house and the costumes and the props used by the actresses, and it all gets enhanced. And then there's also the sound design. The film very deliberately, avoids music almost completely, save for a handful of scenes. And even in those scenes, it's diegetic music, so it means that its source is literally on the screen with the characters, within the story itself. The characters can hear the music as well. So you can make a case that there's actually zero traditional score or soundtrack to the film. And I can kind of see why you do that, because as a result, those few scenes where music is used have breathtaking impact, because you're so used to the lack of music that its sudden and loud appearance is a shock in a positive sense. But what it also does is emphasize the other sounds present in the film: the steps on the wooden floors, the howling wind, the crushing of the waves on the island's beaches. And those sounds, in turn, further enhance that feeling of coldness, of loneliness even. And this is where the romance part is expected to come on, to contrast the cold and harsh environment with the flame of the feelings between the characters. Problem is, I didn't really buy into those feelings. I wasn't convinced, neither by the acting nor by the writing, that what was happening between the two women was anything more than just pure, simple fascination, physical attraction, and a kind of keen interest. But again, no passion, no real flame, no love. I never felt that there was really any chemistry developing between the characters. It was all, again, cold and barren to me. In addition, Portrait is a really slow film. It drags on at times, and it certainly takes a long time between anything even happens between the ladies. So for me, the result was that I was watching this mostly sluggish film about two characters mildly interested in each other for quite a bit, and then they suddenly start sleeping together. And still, even at this point, apart from maybe two or three exchanges, I didn't really feel their connection. I didn't feel any passion between them. It was all a bit hollow and soulless. And to add on to that, predictable. Once the plot is outlined at the very beginning, it follows predictable beats, not once surprising me with anything at all. Now, okay, I won't say it's all bad. There are things about the film that are brilliant. The camera lenses used were deliberately picked by the director to make it look very modern, very contemporary, and that works. The scenery, the clothes, the characters' faces, everything we see on the screen has this distinct, very clear, pronounced look. Cold and dispassionate, but distinct. The music thing, while for me it works generally against the film for the majority of its runtime, it also single-handedly creates its highest highs. When music appears, those couple of scenes are absolutely fantastic. I also liked how the story references that of Orpheus and Eurydice from the Greek mythology throughout the plot, and I loved the ending of it. But at the end of the day, the comparison to Call Me By Your Name is still in the back of my head, because it still to a degree makes sense to compare the two, but it does not do Portrait any favors, because that other movie, it was so warm, so pleasant, so full of life and humor and energy. It was so effortless in everything it did, and it made you want to be with the characters and feel what they're feeling. It also made it crystal clear why they would fall for one another, because it played up them being not only interesting to each other but also just plainly likable. And now Portrait is just so not not any of those things. Instead, you have very clear focus on women empowerment and independent female characters, and that's fine, it's okay, but it's simply not enough. Because what's unforgivable for me is that it's a love story that's dreary and dispassionate, that lacks flair and doesn't engage me on an emotional level. And as much as I prefer to like it for the things that it does right, in the face of these flaws, I just cannot.